We live in a world where we have to grow up. People in this business fall by the wayside because we forget that all of us ultimately answer to people.
Molly Qerim exiting ESPN, exiting First Take quite abruptly, one might say. Last night, Austin Karp of Sports Business Journal reported that Molly Qerim was exiting at the end of the year, but it turns out she is exiting effective immediately.
The internet is on fire right now. Stephen A. Smith just dropped some wild hints about why his longtime First Take co-host, Molly Qerim, suddenly vanished from ESPN after nearly 2 decades. And trust me, the story behind it all sounds way deeper than anyone expected. Here's the full picture, the kind of exit nobody saw coming.
Normally, our friend Molly Qerim would greet you. However, Molly announced last night she will be departing from ESPN. She's hosted First Take for 10 years and elevated the show with her grace, her expertise, her incomparable kindness. She's been an enormous part of our success for a decade. Not only did she keep me and many others in line, she did it with dignity and class and kindness, to say the least.
On September 16th, 2025, the entire sports media world went into shock. One of ESPN's biggest names, the woman who had been the voice of reason between fiery debates for 10 straight years, just walked away. No warning, no countdown, just gone. Fans couldn't believe it, colleagues were whispering, and even Stephen A. himself looked blindsided. This wasn't some slow fade out or a quiet goodbye, it was instant disappearance. And what makes it even crazier is the timing.
We'll miss her and wish her every blessing on her future. I personally am grateful to her for her friendship, and I will miss spending every weekday morning with her right by my side.
Just a day before the bombshell, on Monday, September 15th, Molly was right there on screen doing her job flawlessly, steering heated arguments like a pro. She smiled, joked, and carried herself with that same calm confidence viewers had loved for nearly 20 years. Then, by Tuesday morning, she was gone. Not taking a break, not on vacation, not even out sick. Gone completely. No email statement, no farewell episode, no warning.
Last night, she abruptly resigned as the host of the show. And to say that I'm quite sad about it is an understatement. Molly is a friend. Molly is a coworker. Molly is somebody that I have leaned on many occasions in the past, as she has done when it comes to me.
After 19 years with the network, the woman who helped build First Take's success just vanished from ESPN like a ghost. The first whispers of trouble came from the Sports Business Journal, which initially claimed Molly was planning to leave by the end of the year. That sounded professional enough, until what happened next flipped the entire story upside down. Because instead of coasting to a graceful year-end exit, Molly dropped a bombshell on her Instagram, and the post had people clutching their phones in disbelief.
And a lot of times, some of these things happen, and it's just uncomfortable to see. The details, quite frankly, are none of y'all business. But it's not as if I know all the details. It was a contract negotiation that was going on.
Whatever ESPN wanted to say, she wasn't waiting for them to control the narrative. She was about to tell her own version of why she left. Molly's Instagram post didn't just break the news, it cracked the internet. It started with the chilling words, "The news came out earlier than I intended." That one line said it all. Something had clearly gone wrong behind the scenes. This wasn't the kind of polished goodbye ESPN usually gives to its longtime stars. No farewell montage, no soft exit. This was raw, unplanned, and real.
But we all make decisions that we deem to be in our best interest, for whatever reason. And that story is for her to tell. Do I have an idea? Of course I do. Am I going to share it with you? No. Because again, that's her story to tell.
Her departure wasn't some calculated move. It was an immediate resignation that sent the entire network scrambling for answers. By the very next morning, fans tuning in to First Take got the shock of their lives. There was no Molly at the desk, just Stephen A. Smith sitting alone under those bright studio lights, his tone heavy, his eyes glassy. He opened the show solo, and you could feel the tension through the screen. As he delivered what sounded like a heartfelt goodbye, something about his words felt off, almost too controlled. Stephen said, "She'll be missed," and wished her well on her future projects. A classy move, sure, But when you read between the lines, that's where things start getting strange. Why emphasize that she announced it last night? That little detail was Steven's way of saying, I had no clue this was happening. It wasn't a coordinated goodbye. It was a shockwave. And just when fans thought that was the end of it, Stephen A. went on his SiriusXM podcast, The Stephen A. Smith Show, later that same day. And that's when things got really interesting. His tone shifted, his words got heavier, and he started dropping clues that something much deeper was going on behind closed doors at ESPN.
Molly was going through a contract negotiation, obviously, and that was not going well, obviously, because Molly wasn't getting what she wanted. What did Molly want? Molly wanted to do other things at the network, which included hosting her own show. Let me land on my feet within the network, still be at the worldwide leader, and do my thing. Now, that wasn't happening.
Then, out of nowhere came the bombshell. Stephen confirmed that there was indeed more to the story, more than anyone was being told. But here's the twist. He refused to spill the details, saying it wasn't his place to reveal anything. Now here's where things start to boil over. Stephen A. Smith basically admitted that he knows way more than he's saying, but he's keeping it locked up tight. That kind of move only poured gasoline on the fire because fans instantly went wild trying to piece together what could have happened behind those ESPN walls. He wasn't just hinting, he was dangling the truth right in front of everyone, then pulling it back like a pro.
When he signs off on you, when he signs for you, you get what you want. But guess what? There's a flip to it as well. When he doesn't sign off on you, when he doesn't sign for you, you don't get what you want.
What really grabbed attention, though, was how Stephen kept stressing how abrupt Molly's resignation was. This wasn't some slow, polite handoff or a neat career shift. This was a pull the plug and vanish situation. Even ESPN's own president of content, Burke Magnus, had to step in and try to calm the storm. And what he said only made it sound messier. Burke admitted, the one thing that was unexpected was the timing of all this. She put out a statement because there was a report on it, so it kind of got out of our respective controls. That's corporate speak for the situation blew up before they could manage it. Once that happened, it was chaos. Headlines spinning, fans asking questions, and nobody at ESPN able to get ahead of the story.
You're working at a network where Mina Kimes is making way more money than you, and Mina Kimes is the number what on what show?
To really understand why this hit the network like an earthquake, you've got to realize what Molly Qerim meant to ESPN. She wasn't just another anchor, she was the glue that kept First Take together. Molly first joined the network way back in 2006, working her way up from digital segments and mobile coverage to becoming the face of First Take in 2015. And once she took that moderator's chair, everything changed. Under her guidance, First Take transformed from a sports talk show into a cultural phenomenon. Her poise, timing, and ability to handle the explosive personalities of Stephen A. Smith and countless guests gave the show its signature rhythm. The numbers prove it.
One of the worst kept secrets in the business is that they have a good relationship. They don't. Right? They kind of tired on each other, etc. I'm not gonna go into all the messy details, but the point is they weren't cool with each other to the point someone you work with for 10 years, you don't even mention them when you're gone.
First Take became ESPN's highest-rated studio show, pulling in over 500,000 viewers per episode, and even landing a spot in Sports Business Journal's top 25 sports studio shows of 2024. And it didn't stop there. In 2023, the show hit its all-time peak, record-breaking linear TV numbers, and a digital explosion with over 250 million YouTube views. But here's the thing, Molly wasn't just the person keeping First Take on schedule, she was the show's moral compass. She brought class, precision, and balance to every fiery debate that Stephen A. turned into a battlefield. While he was out there dropping thunder, she was the calm in the storm, steady, sharp, and always professional. Fans adored that contrast. She didn't just moderate, she managed chaos with grace.
Point is, she's seeing not only people getting paid, and none of them really on the number one show. Think about it, Malika's show, always struggling in terms of who's going to be on there. Oh, the cast is not it. Oh, they haven't got their traction yet, but she getting paid. Mina Kimes, a lot of people criticizing her. At the same time, she getting paid. And then you, Molly, I'm number 2 on the number 1 show we got. And I can't get none.
And critics often said that without her, First Take would have lost the one voice, keeping it real and fair for everyone watching. Her presence meant representation in a space that desperately needed it. Molly wasn't just a face on TV. She became a powerful figure for women in sports media, proving that poise and intelligence could command just as much attention as volume and bravado. She broke barriers with her mix of warmth, confidence, and unshakable control under pressure. And that journey? It's wild.
I'm not talking about Molly here, but I'm watching, and I've been watching over the last several years, people in this business fall by the wayside because we forget that all of us ultimately answer to people. We don't get to define our own value. We don't get to define our own worth.
She started at ESPN back in 2006, hustling her way through digital platforms before hitting big on national television. By 2008, she'd already earned an Emmy Award for her work on Fantasy Football Now. From college football sidelines to NFL coverage, she handled it all. Live broadcasts, major interviews, and tense on-air debates that would have rattled most anchors. Her adaptability made her one of ESPN's most valuable players. But what really made her a household name was her chemistry with Stephen A. Smith. For an entire decade, that duo became legendary. Their rhythm was unmatched, his explosive energy clashing perfectly with her composed precision. She knew exactly when to challenge him, when to pull him back, and when to hit him with that subtle smirk that said, "I've got this." Fans loved it. They were the heartbeat of First Take. That's what makes her sudden disappearance so insane. There were no warning signs, none. No leaks, no drama, no whispers of tension. The show was thriving, ratings were climbing, and Molly looked as confident as ever. Then, boom, she was gone. No farewell episode, no goodbye moment, just cryptic posts online and Stephen A.'s painfully vague explanation that left more questions than answers. ESPN later confirmed she wouldn't be returning to any future episodes, speeding up her departure from the supposed end-of-year plan to an immediate exit. Now this is where the cracks in ESPN's perfect image start showing. And it's not pretty. The timing of Molly's exit threw everyone off, especially since First Take was sitting at the top of its game. Ratings were through the roof, online clips were going viral daily, and the show had become part of sports culture itself. So how does a network that prides itself on control suddenly lose one of its biggest stars overnight with zero explanation? Something behind those cameras clearly snapped. For a company that always choreographs every move, from promotions to retirements, this kind of chaotic exit was a serious red flag. It screamed of a system failure. This wasn't a well-planned transition or a mutual agreement. This was something urgent, something that went down fast and ugly. And let's be real, Molly Qerim is no rookie. She's a pro, someone who's always handled herself with class and strategy. For her to walk away that fast, it means something serious must have gone down. Whatever was happening in those boardrooms wasn't just uncomfortable. It had to be toxic enough that leaving immediately felt like the only option left on the table. That's when whispers started swirling that this wasn't about personality clashes or creative differences. No, this was about money, power, and broken promises. Insiders claim that something deep inside the ESPN negotiation room blew up completely, the kind of behind-the-scenes chaos that executives work overtime to bury. And here's where it gets really juicy. Because Molly's departure might not have been just a career move, it could have been a silent protest against the system itself. What fans saw as a sudden resignation might have actually been a calculated statement, walking away to expose what she couldn't say out loud. Now that we know just how shocking her exit truly was, it's time to peel back the layers and get into what really went down behind those shiny studio doors. The contract wars, the power games, and the backroom deals that insiders say pushed everything over the edge. Because trust me, this story goes way beyond just money. Let's be clear, this wasn't just about a paycheck. Sure, money was a huge piece of the puzzle, but underneath that was something way bigger. Power, respect, and a complete breakdown of trust inside ESPN's walls. Things didn't just go off the rails, they exploded. To understand how it all spiraled, you've got to look at the money first, because once the numbers hit the table, everything started to make sense. Stephen A. Smith had inked a jaw-dropping $100 million extension in 2024, locking him in for 5 more years and making him one of the highest-paid personalities in sports media history. His contract practically crowned him the face of ESPN, the undisputed king of sports talk. But here's where it gets uncomfortable, because while Steven was collecting 8 figures, Molly Qerim, his co-host, the woman who helped hold that entire show together, was reportedly making around $500,000 a year. Let that sink in. That's roughly a 40-to-1 pay gap between 2 people running the same show. That's not just unfair, that's insane. And insiders say that when Molly saw those numbers during her renegotiation talks, she was done playing nice. She wasn't demanding to make what Steven made, but she wanted respect, parity, and fair recognition for the value she brought to First Take. After all, her presence wasn't just decoration. She was the stabilizer, the referee, the balance that kept Steven's explosive energy from tipping the show into chaos. But here's where things start twisting. And this is where Marcellus Wiley enters the story. Wiley, a former ESPN insider who worked there from 2007 to 2018, knew Molly personally during her climb through the ranks. And now, he's been one of the loudest voices speaking out about what he believes really went down behind the scenes. According to Marcellus Wiley, Molly wasn't just fighting for a pay raise. She was fighting for respect. Her demands went far beyond money. She wanted growth, representation, and a platform that truly reflected the work she'd put in over nearly 2 decades. Molly was asking for a seat at the table, her own projects, creative control, and a voice equal to her value. But here's the shocking part. ESPN allegedly shut her down on almost every front. Wiley claims that Molly came into those talks ready to evolve beyond First Take. After 10 years of being the steady force keeping egos in check, she wanted new challenges, producing, hosting, or even developing a show of her own. And instead of embracing that vision, the network reportedly gave her the corporate brush-off. No upgrades, no expansion, no recognition, just stay where you are. That rejection hit hard, especially for someone who'd proven herself time and time again. Let's not forget, Molly wasn't some temporary hire or a media experiment. She had anchored First Take through some of the biggest and most explosive sports debates of the decade. From LeBron James's dramatic team changes to the NFL's storm over player protests, she was the one who kept those live conversations from collapsing into chaos. Her calm under fire wasn't just professionalism, it was an art form. Wiley points out that the network's decision wasn't just short-sighted, it was personal. And this is where his theory turns explosive. Because according to him, Molly's stalled negotiations might not have been purely about contracts at all. They might have been influenced by Stephen A. Smith's power within ESPN. That's right. Wiley suggests that Stephen's growing influence could have tilted the scales during Molly's talks. Whether intentional or not, his rising dominance in the company may have made it harder for others around him, even longtime collaborators, to get fair deals or creative opportunities. If Wiley's right, then Molly wasn't just negotiating with ESPN. She was negotiating against a system built around Stephen's control. Now here's where things get real spicy. Marcellus Wiley's theory paints Stephen A. Smith as more than just ESPN's biggest star. It makes him sound like the unofficial kingmaker of the entire network. According to Wiley, Stephen's influence runs so deep that he can practically decide who rises and who fades at ESPN based on whether or not he backs them. And when it came to Molly Qerim, that power apparently wasn't used in her favor. Think about that for a second. Wiley claims that Stephen didn't lift a finger to support Molly's push for growth or recognition, even after a decade of sitting side by side on national television. Instead of advocating for her, he allegedly stayed silent, maybe even benefited from her absence. And when you start connecting the dots, the evidence gets hard to ignore. Several reports have confirmed that Stephen's massive $100 million contract extension gave him huge creative control, not just over First Take, but over the direction of other ESPN shows too. Insiders say his deal included input on casting decisions, content development, and even who gets hired or fired for First Take-related projects. That's not just star power, that's executive-level influence. And here's the wild part. This kind of setup isn't new in the entertainment world. When a talent becomes too big to fail, networks start bending around them. They stop being just employees and start becoming gatekeepers. Wiley suggests that's exactly what happened here, that Stephen's dominance gave him a quiet authority no one dared challenge. His voice wasn't just loud on camera, it echoed in the boardrooms too. So if he wasn't backing Molly during her contract talks, that silence might have spoken louder than words. She could have been fighting not just for money or creative freedom, but against an entire system built to protect one man's throne. And when someone realizes that kind of power imbalance, walking away might not just be a choice, It might be the only way to take their power back. If Wiley's theory is right, then Stephen A. Smith's influence inside ESPN isn't just powerful, it's strategic. The man has allegedly used his pull to help certain people rise within the company, but Molly Qerim, she wasn't one of them. That kind of selective loyalty raises a chilling question. What determines who gets Stephen's backing and who gets left behind? Insiders have long whispered that Stephen's influence works like an internal gatekeeper system. If he supports you, doors open. If he doesn't, they slam shut. And when you look at how fast Molly's plans fell apart, that pattern starts to make perfect sense. Here's the thing. ESPN executives, including Burke Magnus, actually confirmed that there was an agreement in place at first. The original plan was calm and professional. Molly would slowly transition out of First Take by the end of the year, exploring new opportunities within the network. She was supposed to branch out, host her own projects, and expand her role across ESPN's lineup. That would have been the natural next step for someone of her stature, but then something changed, and it changed fast. Somewhere between that agreement and her abrupt disappearance, those plans completely unraveled. Multiple insiders claim that in the final stages of negotiation, Molly was hit with a take-it-or-leave-it ultimatum, the kind of deal that leaves no room for pride, no room for respect. She wasn't offered the career growth she'd earned, she was boxed in. That's when she allegedly decided, "I'd rather walk than stay silent." And the question that keeps haunting fans is, why? Why did a peaceful transition suddenly turn into a cold, immediate resignation? Why would a woman with nearly 20 years of loyalty to ESPN just walk out overnight? Industry insiders say the answer runs deep. It's about trust and respect that had been slowly breaking down behind the scenes. Molly reportedly felt undervalued, underpaid, and overlooked, despite being a major reason First Take became the powerhouse it is today. She'd carried the weight of the show's balance, handled countless tense debates, and represented women in a space where female voices are often drowned out. And yet, when it came time for recognition, she allegedly got brushed aside. And when you stack her pay and treatment against the broader compensation structure at ESPN, the numbers make her case even stronger, because the gaps are staggering. This is where things get downright uncomfortable, because when you start comparing numbers, the imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. Molly Qerim wasn't just underpaid, she was undervalued. Imagine being the co-host of ESPN's biggest, most profitable morning show, the face millions of viewers see every day, and finding out that analysts with smaller roles, less airtime, and fewer responsibilities are making more than you. That's not just unfair, that's humiliating. Insiders say this was one of the final straws for Molly. She'd kept First Take running like a well-oiled machine, managing fiery personalities, intense live debates, and unpredictable moments on air, all while keeping the show smooth, professional, and engaging. That's real work, the kind that makes or breaks a broadcast. Yet, when it came time to cash the checks, she was reportedly pulling in less than commentators who only showed up once or twice a week. The situation gets even messier when you add ESPN's financial backdrop to the mix. The network has been hit hard by cord-cutting and declining cable subscriptions, leading to multiple rounds of layoffs and severe cost-cutting efforts over the past few years. On paper, executives could easily argue that they simply couldn't meet everyone's salary demands, that Molly's exit was just a casualty of the budget cuts. But come on, that explanation only goes so far, because while ESPN was supposedly tightening belts, it was also signing off on massive deals with its biggest stars. Let's not forget, Stephen A. Smith alone is pulling in over $20 million a year under his new contract. If the network can throw that kind of money around, how does it make sense that they couldn't meet Molly's much smaller request for a raise or career advancement? That contradiction speaks volumes. It reveals a deeper pattern, one where power dictates who gets rewarded and who gets replaced. Stephen's negotiations went down smoothly, resulting in one of the largest paydays in sports media history. And here's where the whole situation hits its breaking point. Molly's contract talks didn't collapse over millions. They reportedly fell apart over minor adjustments and a few simple requests for growth. That's what makes this so wild. Her demands weren't extravagant. She wasn't asking for Stephen A. Smith money, she just wanted fair treatment, acknowledgement, and a path forward. But ESPN's response made it crystal clear where their loyalty stood. Keep Stephen happy at all costs, and treat everyone else as replaceable. For someone who'd spent nearly a decade building First Take into a cultural phenomenon, that message must have stung on every level. both personally and professionally. Imagine giving your all, becoming the backbone of a billion-dollar brand, and then being told your contributions don't matter once the cameras stop rolling. It's more than frustrating, it's insulting. But what makes it even uglier are the implications this has on ESPN's workplace culture. If Wiley's allegations are true, advancement at the network isn't about talent or hard work. It's about proximity to power. He claims that success depends less on your skill and more on how close you are to the decision makers, especially one man, Stephen A. Smith. That kind of setup doesn't just create inequality, it breeds toxicity. It traps talented people under invisible ceilings while others glide upward through personal connections. And here's where things take a darker turn. Because when you strip away the money and the contracts, what you're left with is something far more disturbing: ego, gender politics, and years of quiet resentment. Multiple insiders have said that the environment inside ESPN has been toxic for a long time, especially for women who try to climb beyond the roles they've been assigned. And Molly's situation may have been the spark that finally exposed it. Now, this is where Marcellus Wiley's revelations blow the lid off the whole thing. Wiley has been fearless in speaking about what he calls the hidden beef between Molly and Stephen, a behind-the-scenes tension that fans never saw on camera. According to him, their relationship wasn't nearly as smooth off-screen as it appeared during those fiery debates. He claims there were subtle power struggles brewing for years, moments of tension, frustration, and even silence between tapings that hinted at something much deeper than simple disagreement. Wiley's insights paint a picture of a workplace dynamic that was far more dysfunctional than anyone realized. This revelation flips everything we thought we knew about the First Take dynamic. For years, fans believed they were watching genuine chemistry, a perfect balance of tension, respect, and charisma between Stephen A. Smith and Molly Qerim. But according to Marcellus Wiley, that so-called chemistry might have been nothing more than a performance. He claims it was all part of the act, a polished, professional facade carefully maintained to keep the show's image intact while real tension was bubbling just out of sight. That's a bombshell. Think about it. For nearly 10 years, these two shared the same stage, the same desk, the same spotlight. Day after day, they debated, joked, and smiled through disagreements that, according to Wiley, may have masked something way colder underneath. They weren't just co-workers. They were practically work spouses, bound together by the show's success and the network's expectations. So to learn now that much of what we saw might have been scripted professionalism instead of mutual respect, that's huge. It paints a picture of a set that looked perfect on TV but was tense, divided, and quietly falling apart off camera. And the deeper you dig, the worse it gets. Wiley's allegations point to a broader cultural problem inside ESPN, one that goes beyond just one pair of hosts. He claims the network has long had an issue with how it treats its female talent, not just in pay, but in how their work is valued. Women reportedly face tougher scrutiny, limited advancement opportunities, and constant pressure to stay likable even while dealing with inequities their male colleagues never face. Wiley calls it systemic undervaluing, a built-in bias that rewards loud personalities while sidelining the steady professionals who actually hold the shows together. And Molly's story seems to fit that pattern perfectly. She was the glue of First Take, the one holding the chaos in check, yet somehow she became the most replaceable piece in the entire machine. This entire situation paints a harsh picture, one that shows Molly Qerim watching less prominent female personalities rise through the ranks, land better contracts, and score bigger opportunities, while she, the woman anchoring ESPN's most watched studio show, was being lowballed and quietly dismissed. The gender dynamics here aren't just obvious, they're impossible to ignore. It's as if ESPN was fine with rewarding women who fit certain safe secondary roles, sideline reporters, feature contributors, or occasional anchors, but not the woman who sat at the center of their flagship debate show 5 days a week. The kind of role that requires poise, intelligence, and live performance under pressure somehow didn't qualify for equal respect or pay. And that double standard, it cuts deep. The psychological toll of all this must have been enormous. Imagine giving your entire professional life to a company, watching it break records and dominate ratings because of your presence, then realizing you're the one being undervalued while others coast ahead. Molly wasn't just fighting numbers on a paycheck. She was fighting the message those numbers sent about her worth. And to make things worse, multiple insiders claim ESPN's final offer to her was flat out insulting. While exact figures were never made public, the renewal package she was given was allegedly far below what she was asking, and even lower compared to what other on-air talent with smaller audiences were earning. It was the corporate equivalent of saying, "You're replaceable." And that's the kind of statement no professional, especially one of her caliber, takes lightly. It's almost unbelievable considering her track record. Molly was the stabilizer of First Take, the reason those fiery debates didn't completely go off the rails. Her timing, emotional intelligence, and ability to keep both the hosts and the audience engaged were rare gifts that you can't teach. She didn't just moderate arguments, she made chaos look graceful. The ratings proved her worth, yet the numbers in her contract didn't. And then there's Stephen A. Smith's response, or rather, his non-response. His cryptic behavior after her exit has had fans dissecting every word he's said since. Instead of showing transparency or even empathy, he leaned into vague statements and indirect lessons that many believe were aimed straight at Molly. Just days after her sudden resignation, Stephen took to his podcast and delivered a speech that raised eyebrows everywhere. He started talking about leverage and business hierarchy, saying things like, "You have to know your place in this game," and warning people not to overestimate their worth. On the surface, it sounded like generic advice, but to those paying attention, it felt like a veiled message. Fans and insiders alike interpreted that episode as a subtle attempt to rewrite the narrative, to frame Molly's departure as a case of overreaching or poor negotiation instead of a symptom of a broken system. By speaking in metaphors instead of facts, Stephen managed to sound objective while quietly shifting the blame away from himself and the network. And that timing, way too convenient. Dropping a lecture about leverage right after your co-host walks away from the show you share? That's not coincidence, that's calculation. It gave the impression that he wanted to control how fans saw the story, to make it seem like Molly had simply misplayed her hand, instead of being pushed out by a machine that didn't value her. Even though Stephen A. Smith swore he wasn't talking about Molly, come on, everyone could read between the lines. The timing of his so-called industry talk was just too perfect, and the tone? Way too pointed. It sounded less like general business advice and more like a not-so-subtle warning shot to anyone thinking about challenging ESPN's power hierarchy. The subtext was loud and clear. Know your place. Don't challenge the system. Remember who runs the room. That kind of message doesn't need to name names. Everyone already knows who it's about. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Stephen's brand of passive-aggressive commentary lets him send a clear message while keeping his hands clean. He can shrug and say, "I was just speaking generally," while everyone else knows exactly which situation he's referring to. It's a manipulative kind of control, one that reinforces who's in charge without ever saying it outright. And after everything that's happened, it leaves fans wondering whether this is how ESPN protects its stars, by quietly silencing anyone who dares to disrupt the balance of power. But while Stephen A. keeps spinning his narrative, the rumor mill is exploding. Word on the street says Molly Qerim might be heading to Fox Sports, with insiders whispering about a deal worth around $2 million a year, 4 times what she was reportedly making at ESPN. That's not just a new job, that's vindication. If those rumors are true, Fox isn't just giving Molly a paycheck, they're making a statement. They see her worth, even if ESPN didn't. And the thought of her joining a rival network, that's got ESPN executives sweating. A move like that could shake up the entire sports media landscape. Imagine Molly hosting her own show at Fox. Confident, unfiltered, and completely out of ESPN's control. That could cut right into First Take's audience and finally force the network to reckon with the consequences of undervaluing her. Meanwhile, ESPN is scrambling to find her replacement. And it's not looking easy. Reports say there's a 30 to 45-day audition process underway, but insiders are already skeptical. Let's be real, you can't just replace Molly Qerim. Her poise, timing, and ability to navigate chaos made her irreplaceable. Whoever takes that seat next has an impossible task ahead, balancing Stephen A.'s fire while earning the respect of millions of fans still wondering why Molly's chair is empty. And here's the big question. Will ESPN dare to bring in someone strong enough to challenge Stephen's dominance on air? Or will they play it safe and hire someone who keeps quiet, plays along, and protects the status quo? The answer to that will say everything about where ESPN goes next. One thing's for sure, this story isn't over. If you think the drama's done, think again, because Molly's next move might just flip the entire industry upside down. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Molly's headed to Fox? Or will ESPN pull something unexpected? Let me know below, and I'll see you on the next one.